Hey, Soul Stories fam. Today's love story will make you blush, sigh, and maybe throw a pillow. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell like it owes you money. Maya Carter stepped into the gleaming glass tower of Sterling Enterprises with the mindset of someone shopping. Fast, efficient, and not paying attention to the curious stares. At 25, she had nothing but her black hair tied up with a bright yellow elastic band, worn-out sneakers, and a slightly tight blue janitor's uniform at the shoulders. The janitorial job at this prestigious real estate company was an opportunity for her to earn money to pay for her mother's medical bills, and Maya wasn't about to let the whispers from the office workers hold her back. "This new janitor looks like she just walked out of a basketball court," a man in a suit whispered to his colleague as Maya pushed her cleaning cart past. She heard it, but shrugged and continued wiping the glass notice board, humming the lyrics of a cheesy pop song playing in her earbuds. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the building, Julian Sterling, 32, was sitting in his luxurious office, where LED lights illuminated a corner of the city. As the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, Julian not only owned a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire, but also had a reputation that made the entire company tremble. He always appeared in a perfectly tailored suit, his slicked-back hair gleaming, and his sharp gaze as if he could slice through a contract with a single glance. Employees called him the Arctic Storm, not just because of his cold demeanor, but also because of his ability to freeze anyone in their tracks when he got angry. Tonight, Julian was buried in paperwork for a resort project in Santorini, trying to find a way to persuade a difficult investor. The clock struck 9 p.m., and the floor was silent, except for the steady clicking of keys from his office. Until there was a knock, a light tap on the door, not loud but enough to make Julian glance up, his brow furrowing. Who dared disturb him at this hour? The door opened, and Maya stepped in, holding a mop, the cleaning cart rattling behind her. She looked around the office, a space twice as ample as her tiny apartment, with a polished mahogany desk and windows that looked out over the glittering horizon. Julian, scribbling something, didn't even look up. "Get out," he said, his voice low and cold as ice. But Maya wasn't the type to follow orders easily. She crossed her arms, propping the mop like a cane beside her. "Can you lift your foot?" "I need to clean the floor," she said, her voice casual as if she were asking for directions. Julian snapped his head up, his dark brown eyes wide in shock. He couldn't believe his ears. In 3 years as CEO, no one had dared interrupt him, let alone order him to lift his foot. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice so low it was almost a whisper, but anyone who knew him would recognize it as the sign of a storm about to break. Maya, oblivious to the tension in the air, pointed at the floor. "Your foot. It's on the spot I need to clean. If you don't lift it, I'll clean your shoe. And I'm guessing those are pretty expensive." She tilted her head, giving a slight, innocent yet mischievous smile. Julian looked at her, from her high ponytail to her worn-out sneakers, and for the first time in his life, he felt struck by something he didn't expect. He wanted to yell, to throw her out, but instead, he lifted his foot. It was a small gesture, but to Julian it felt like admitting defeat. Maya, unfazed by the CEO's inner turmoil, began cleaning the floor, whistling a cheerful tune that Julian was sure he'd never heard before, probably some trendy TikTok song. She moved the cart, wiping every corner, even pausing to pick up a scrap of paper under his desk. "You work so late. You must be making a fortune, huh?" she blurted out, still not looking at him, as if she were talking to the mop. Julian, still processing the shock, replied before he even thought, "Why do you care about my money?" Maya shrugged and kept cleaning. "No, I just thought if I made as much money as you, I'd buy a new pair of shoes first." She glanced down at her worn-out sneakers, then at Julian's polished leather ones. "You probably don't know what it feels like to wear torn shoes." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Maya finished her work, pushed the cart to the door, and turned back to throw a final remark. "Thanks for lifting your foot. I'll be back tomorrow to take out the trash. Don't let the bin get too full." The door closed, leaving Julian in his silent office, still holding his pen, his mind spinning like a tangled mess. Who was that girl? And why, in just 5 minutes, did she make him feel like his perfect world had just been shaken by a small storm named Maya? Maya Carter, after her unsought confrontation with Julian Sterling, had become the subject of gossip in the staff break room at Sterling Enterprises. That new janitor dared to tell the boss to lift his foot so she could clean the floor, an accountant whispered, her eyes sparkling as if she had just witnessed a marvel. She's got no fear, a guy from IT added, holding a cold cup of coffee. Maya, of course, didn't care. She was busy pushing her cleaning cart down the 27th floor hallway, her earbuds securely in place with a lively pop song blasting, mumbling the lyrics as though the whole world was her stage. The janitorial job wasn't glamorous, but it helped pay for her mother's medical bills, and that was enough. As for the CEO encounter, just another amusing moment of the day, like finding a coin under the office couch. Meanwhile, on the top floor, Julian Sterling was immersed in an intense online meeting. The screen before him displayed 3 stern faces of investors from London, Tokyo, and New York, all debating the Santorini resort project. This project was Julian's pet, an ultra-luxurious resort perched on the cliffs overlooking the Aegean Sea. But costs were spiraling out of control, and partners kept questioning its feasibility. Julian, you need to cut 20% of the costs, or we'll pull our funding. The investor from London's voice rang out through the speakers, as cold as the winter wind. Julian, dressed in his perfectly tailored navy suit, gripped his pen tightly, trying to keep his voice calm. We are optimizing the design. I'll send the revised report in 48 hours, he replied. Though his mind was racing, figuring out how to salvage the situation without losing credibility. Just then, knock, knock, knock. The soft tapping on the door was enough to interrupt Julian's thoughts. He glanced up, his brow furrowing, already ready to snap at whoever dared to disturb him. The door opened, and Maya appeared, pushing her cart with a clatter. She was in her janitor uniform, her hair tied up high, swaying with each step, and her worn-out sneakers squeaked on the wooden floor. Can I take out the trash? Just 5 minutes, she said, her tone as calm as if she were asking to borrow a pen. Julian felt blood rush to his head. This girl again. He was in the middle of a multi-million-dollar meeting, and she dared walk in as if it were a sidewalk cafe? Can't you see I'm busy? Julian growled, his voice so low that it made the 3 investors on screen go silent. A normal employee would have shrank back, apologized profusely, and fled. But Maya was not a regular employee. She shrugged, leaning on her mop like it was a comedian's cane. I see, she replied, her voice nonchalant. But I'm on a break in 10 minutes, and your trash bin is overflowing. You choose. I clean it now, or let it smell all night. She tilted her head, flashing a mischievous smile, her brown eyes sparkling as if challenging him. The entire online meeting fell into silence. The investor from Tokyo coughed softly, as if hiding a smile. For the first time in his life, Julian felt cornered. He wanted to shout at her, throw her out, but her words "smell all night" kept echoing in his head, and he involuntarily imagined his office filled with the stench of cold coffee and sandwich wrappers. Fine, he said, his voice stiff, signaling for her to come in. Hurry up. Maya nodded, her smile widening like she had won a game of chess. She pushed the cart in, started emptying the trash can by his desk, and hummed a cheerful tune that Julian was sure was some detergent commercial jingle. The investors on the screen began whispering, clearly distracted by Maya's presence. Julian, who is that? The investor from New York asked curiously. Julian, trying to regain his composure, muttered, Just a cleaning staff. But his gaze couldn't leave Maya. She moved swiftly, emptied the trash, wiped down the desk, and even picked up a fallen pen from the floor, neatly placing it back in front of him. Be careful, don't drop it again. Such a nice pen, she said, half joking, half serious, before pushing the cart out the door. All done, thank you. She waved before closing the door, leaving Julian with a spotless office and a scrambled mind. The meeting continued, but Julian could no longer focus. He answered the investors' questions mechanically, his mind constantly drifting back to the image of Maya, the girl with her high ponytail, worn-out sneakers, and a fearlessness that defied everything. When the meeting ended, the clock read 10 p.m. Julian shut his laptop, staring out the window, where the city lights twinkled. He tried to focus on the Santorini project, but the only question in his mind was, Who is this girl who dared to challenge me? That evening, Julian returned to his penthouse, where everything was perfect down to the last detail, from the Italian leather sofa to his rare wine collection. But he couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, a glass of wine in his hand, and for the first time, he felt like his world was no longer entirely in his control. Maya, the janitor with her mischievous smile and nonchalant attitude, had unwittingly shaken the ice wall he had built around himself. He told himself it was just a silly moment, that tomorrow he would regain his composure. But deep down, Julian knew that the small storm named Maya wasn't going to disappear that easily. Meanwhile, Maya, after her shift, sat on the night bus heading back to her small apartment on the outskirts. She took off her earbuds, gazing out the window, smiling as she remembered Julian's stunned face. "What kind of CEO gets so easily rattled?" she murmured, then laughed. To her, it was just another regular workday, but little did she know, she had just planted a tiny seed in the heart of the man who seemed impervious to everything. Maya Carter pushed the cleaning cart, which rattled down the 27th floor hallway of Sterling Enterprises, her earbuds tightly in place, humming a pop song that she was sure no one in this fancy building knew. The late-night janitorial work wasn't her dream job, but it paid the medical bills for her mother, and that was enough for Maya. She imagined herself as Captain Clean, the superhero of dust and office trash, and today her target was Julian Sterling's office, the place that, according to rumors, only the bravest dared enter after 8 p.m. Maya, of course, wasn't bothered by the rumors. To her, Julian was just some guy in an expensive suit, easier to annoy than she thought. Meanwhile, Julian stood in front of the giant whiteboard in his office, where tangled blueprints and notes for the Santorini Resort project were giving him a headache. This project was his passion, a super luxurious resort on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea. But construction costs were swelling like an overinflated balloon, ready to burst in front of the investors. Julian, with his red pen in hand, circled numbers, drew arrows and muttered, "There has to be a way." He had been working for 3 hours, with a cold cup of coffee on his desk, and the pressure from the online meeting earlier still weighing heavily on him. Feeling the need to decompress after a few cups of coffee, he stood up and walked into the private bathroom in the corner of his office. Maya knocked gently on the door, more out of courtesy than expectation of a response. Hearing nothing, she pushed the door open and entered, dragging her cleaning cart behind her. Julian's office looked like a museum, a polished ebony desk, Italian leather chairs, and windows that opened up to the glittering horizon. She glanced at the trash can filled with coffee cups and scrap paper, but was quickly drawn to the whiteboard. The lines, numbers, and arrows were all too familiar to her. Since childhood, Maya had been fascinated by architecture, spending hours in the library reading about Frank Lloyd Wright and Zaha Hadid, dreaming of designing buildings of her own. Although life had forced her to put that dream on hold, the passion still burned quietly like a small flame in a fireplace. She paused, leaning the mop against the wall, and tilted her head to examine the whiteboard. One detail made her frown. The placement of the load-bearing columns in the design was overly complicated, driving up the costs by double, and the aesthetics were like a storage warehouse by the sea, she muttered. Unable to resist, Maya picked up a green pen that was lying carelessly on Julian's desk and started sketching. She redrew a section of the design, simplifying the columns, adjusting the angles to make use of the natural terrain, saving on materials while expanding the view of the sea. She added an elegant curved roof, creating the illusion that the resort was floating on the cliff. Lost in the task, she didn't hear the sound of the bathroom door opening. "What are you doing?" Julian's voice rang out, cold as ice, making Maya jump and drop the pen. She turned around to find him standing in the bathroom doorway, still holding a tissue, his eyes blazing. Julian, having just stepped out, was stunned to see his whiteboard, the result of countless sleepless nights, now adorned with fresh green lines. "Who told you to touch my board?" he growled, walking toward her, his presence overwhelming. Maya, instead of shrinking back, crossed her arms and shrugged. "Look at it," she said, her voice as casual as if she were offering him a slice of cake. "This way is 30% cheaper and looks better. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Julian's eyes widened in disbelief at the audacity of this janitor with her bright yellow hair tie. He was ready to shout, prepared to throw her out. But his gaze moved over Maya's design. The graceful lines, the clever arrangement, and the idea for the curved roof made him stop. He stepped closer to the board, examined it closely, and felt his anger slowly shift into curiosity. "Explain," he said, his voice still firm but less harsh. Maya, as if standing on a TED Talk stage, pointed to the design. "Look here. The load-bearing columns in your original design are too thick, using concrete like you want to build a pyramid. If you adjust the angles like this and use the natural terrain, you can cut material costs while still ensuring safety. This curved roof creates a focal point, making the resort look like a work of art. Tourists will line up to take Instagram photos. Trust me." She paused, realizing she had rambled, and glanced at Julian, waiting for a reaction. For the first time in his life, Julian felt knocked out by a janitor. He wanted to argue, to say that someone without a degree couldn't possibly understand the complexity of this million-dollar project. But he couldn't, because she was right. Her idea was not only feasible, but it was brilliant. He looked at the design, then at Maya, then back at the design. "Where did you study architecture?" he asked, his voice filled with doubt. Maya shrugged, wiping her hands on her uniform. "I didn't study it. I taught myself by reading books, watching YouTube, and borrowing some old magazines from your trash bin. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. You should read it sometime." She flashed him a mischievous grin, as though she had just told a joke. Julian was speechless. He wanted to laugh, to get angry, but in the end, he muttered, "Are you done?" "Clean up." Maya nodded, pushing the cleaning cart out, but not forgetting to look back. "If you need someone to double-check the drawings, just call me. First time's free." When the door closed behind her, Julian stood alone, staring at Maya's green sketches. He took out his phone, snapped a picture, then sat down in his chair, rubbing his temples. He had faced top architects, but never had a janitor made him stop and think. Maya Carter, with her worn-out sneakers and nonchalant attitude, didn't just clean the floor, she had also swept away the complacency in his mind. That evening, instead of working on the report, Julian opened his laptop and typed Maya's name into the HR system, curious about the woman who was shaking the perfect world he had built. Meanwhile, Maya stood in the hallway, leaning against her cleaning cart, looking through the glass door at the whiteboard. She muttered to herself, "I can't believe I just drew all over the CEO's board. Mom would probably say I'm crazy." She laughed, shook her head, and continued pushing her cart, unaware that her scribbling had made Julian start looking at her in a completely different way. Julian Sterling sat in his office, the LED lights illuminating every corner of his polished ebony desk, but his mind was elsewhere. In front of him was a photo of Maya's green sketches on his phone, with elegant lines and a bold curved roof idea that he couldn't stop thinking about. He had sent the sketch to his architectural team for analysis, and their response stunned him. If implemented, the cost would be reduced by at least 25%, and the design exceeds the client's aesthetic requirements. Julian, who had always prided himself on controlling everything, felt as if a strange wind had swept through, leaving him with a series of unanswered questions. How could a janitor with no degree, no experience, come up with an idea that his multi-million-dollar team of architects hadn't thought of? That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He lay on his king-size bed in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling. But instead of thinking about numbers or strategies, his mind kept returning to Maya Carter. The girl with the high ponytail, worn-out sneakers, and a mischievous smile, as if the world were nothing more than a joke. He sat up, opened his laptop, and for the first time in his life, searched the HR records of a janitor. Maya's profile appeared, short and pitiful. Name, age 25, high school diploma, and a note that she worked part-time to support her family. No college degree, no specialized training, nothing. Julian furrowed his brow, feeling like he was reading an unsolvable puzzle. The next morning, he decided he needed to confront Maya. Not to reprimand her, that phase was behind him, but to understand why she, someone who made him, a CEO who had never doubted himself, feels so confused. He sent a short email to the HR department, asking Maya to come to his office at the end of her shift. Just to talk, he told himself, but deep down he knew he was stepping into entirely uncharted territory. When Maya walked into his office at 9 p.m., she was still in her blue uniform, her high ponytail swaying, and her worn-out sneakers making their familiar squeaking sound. She looked around and saw Julian sitting behind his desk, not in his usual suit, but wearing a white shirt with sleeves rolled up, revealing his muscular arms. "Oh, you're not wearing a suit today?" she blurted out, then giggled. "You look less scary." Julian, who had prepared a serious speech, was thrown off by her remark. He cleared his throat and tried to regain his composure. "Miss Carter, please sit. I want to talk about the design sketch from the other day." Maya raised an eyebrow, pulled up a chair, and swung her legs as if she were in a cafe rather than the CEO's office. "The sketch? You like it, right?" "I told you it would save money," she said, her tone casual. Julian studied her, looking for signs of arrogance, but all he saw was a natural confidence, as if she didn't need anyone's approval to know her worth. "Where did you get that idea from?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "Don't tell me you just randomly thought of it while cleaning the floor." Maya laughed and tilted her head. "Not exactly random. I've liked architecture since I was a kid, but life didn't let me go to college. My family couldn't afford it, and my mom was sick. So I taught myself books in the library, YouTube videos, and even those old magazines you threw away. You know, the real estate articles in your trash bin are great, full of ideas that your design team missed." She shrugged, as if she were telling a typical story. Julian was speechless. He had met top architects from Harvard, engineers who had worked for large corporations, but none had made him feel as small as this girl. Not because she was better than them, though her idea was truly brilliant, but because she did it with a sincerity and passion he rarely saw. "You don't have a degree, no formal training. How can you be sure you're right?" he asked, not to attack, but because he genuinely wanted to know. Maya looked him straight in the eye, her smile fading, but her gaze still bright. "Because I trust what I see. Books don't lie, and the cliff in Santorini doesn't either. You don't need a degree to know how a building should look when it's standing between the sea and the sky." She paused, then added with a mischievous tone, "And if I'm wrong, you can fire me. After all, I'm just a janitor, right?" Julian chuckled, a rare sound echoing through the office. He shook his head, unable to believe a janitor just made him laugh. "You're not just a janitor," he said, his voice softening without him realizing it. "Your idea, it's being reviewed by my team. If it's feasible, you'll be credited." Maya raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Credit? Are you going to give me overtime?" She laughed, stood up, and clapped her hands on her uniform. "Well, I have to clean the floor below. If you need me to sketch anything else, leave the paper in the trash, and I'll pick it up." She winked, pushed the cleaning cart out, leaving Julian with a strange feeling, both confused and impressed. When the door closed, Julian looked at the sketch on his phone, then at Maya's profile on his laptop. He wondered if he was missing something bigger than just a design idea. This girl, with her unshakable confidence and unrecognized passion, was making him question himself, a CEO who always thought he had all the answers. He stood up, walked out onto the office balcony, and looked down at the twinkling city. For the first time, Julian felt like his world was no longer fully under his control, and strangely enough, he didn't hate the feeling. Meanwhile, Maya, after cleaning the floor downstairs, sat in the hallway, opened a bottle of water, and looked at her worn-out sneakers. "Did I just give an architecture presentation to the CEO?" she muttered, then burst out laughing. "If Mom knew, she'd probably say I was making it up." She shook her head, put the water bottle away, and continued her work, unaware that her scribbling had caused Julian Sterling, the man who had never doubted himself, to begin questioning the very limits he had set for his world. Julian Sterling wasn't the type to be curious about other people's lives. He always thought his time was more valuable than any personal stories. But Maya Carter had made him break that rule. After their confrontation in his office, her design for the Santorini resort was not only approved by his architectural team, still it was also sent straight to the investors, receiving rare praise. Julian, though reluctant to admit it, found himself obsessed with one question. Who is this girl? He needed to know more, not only to understand her talent, but also for a vague reason he hadn't yet named. On Saturday morning, Julian, skipping his usual suit, wore a dark blue polo and jeans, the most casual outfit he had, and drove to the public library in the suburbs, where he had overheard from an employee that Maya often visited. The library was an old building with faded yellow walls, the smell of old books and damp wood mixing in the air. Julian stepped inside, feeling out of place, like a whale stranded on land. He, accustomed to luxury meeting rooms and five-star restaurants, now stood between dusty bookshelves under the watchful eye of an elderly librarian. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm looking for information about someone who frequents here." "Maya Carter," Julian said, trying to keep his voice steady, although he felt like he was doing something absurd. The librarian, Mrs. Lan, with silver hair and glasses perched on her nose, looked him up and down. "Who are you to be asking about Maya?" she asked, her voice skeptical. Julian fumbled, unaccustomed to being questioned. "I am her boss. I want to learn more about one of my employees." Mrs. Lan raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, but then smiled. "Maya, huh? She's special. Every weekend she's here, borrowing architecture books and sitting for hours reading. Once I saw her sketch an entire building on scrap paper. It was beautiful, like a painting. She told me she wanted to be an architect, but her mom was sick, so she works to pay for medical bills." Julian stood still, feeling as if someone had just lightly punched him in the chest. He imagined Maya, with her worn-out shoes and mischievous smile, sitting among old books, dreaming of buildings she never thought she'd have a chance to build. "Is she talented?" he asked, his voice low. Mrs. Lan chuckled and pointed to a corner of the library. "See that picture on the wall? Maya drew it when she was in high school. It's an imagined building, but I bet it's more beautiful than any of those resorts out there." Julian looked over and saw a watercolor sketch of a house on a hill. The lines were simple but full of emotion. He unconsciously smiled, a strange feeling rising in him, part admiration, part guilt. Back in his office, Julian couldn't focus. He thought about Maya, her deferred dream, and how he had underestimated her simply because she was a janitor. He decided to do something he had never done before. Invite Maya to lunch, not to discuss work, but to understand her more. But he didn't choose one of his usual fancy restaurants. He knew Maya would laugh at him if he took her to a place where a drink cost as much as a day's wages for her. Instead, he picked a small cafe near the company with rustic wooden tables and the smell of freshly toasted bread. He sent a message through HR. "Meet me at 1 p.m. at Corner Cafe. We need to talk." When Maya walked into the cafe, she looked like a breath of fresh air on a hot summer day. A white t-shirt, jeans, and her familiar worn-out sneakers. She looked at Julian, who was awkwardly holding the menu, and grinned. "You know about this place. I thought you only ate at places with white tablecloths." Julian blushed, trying to keep a serious face. "I wanted to try something new. Order whatever you want." Maya, without hesitation, ordered an iced milk coffee and a boiled egg sandwich. Julian, who had never stepped into a casual place like this, looked at the menu as if it were written in Martian. "I'll have a cappuccino," he said, his voice confident but tragically mispronouncing the name of the drink. Maya burst out laughing, her clear laughter causing a few people in the cafe to look over. "Cappuccino? Are you ordering coffee or naming an Italian movie character?" She covered her mouth, but her eyes still sparkled mischievously. Julian, for the first time in his life, felt both foolish and relieved. Cappuccino, he corrected himself, his face turning bright red. Maya shrugged and took a sip of her iced milk coffee. "Relax, boss. No one here is going to bite you." During lunch, Julian tried to ask about Maya's sketches, but the conversation quickly drifted to other topics. Maya told him about her childhood, when she used to draw houses on her school notebooks, dreaming of building a home for her mother with windows overlooking the sea. Julian, though not used to sharing, found himself talking about the first time he saw a Frank Gehry building and how it felt like the whole world opened up before him. "I didn't know you liked architecture," Maya said, her tone sincere. "I thought you only liked counting money." Julian laughed, a rare sound. Even he found it unfamiliar. As they left the cafe, Julian realized something. Maya wasn't just smart with brilliant architectural ideas. She also had a strange allure, a combination of confidence, humor, and a warm heart she hid behind her mischievous smile. He watched her walk away, her high ponytail swaying, and told himself he had to do something to give her back the opportunities life had taken from her. Not just for her talent, but because he was starting to feel something deeper, a feeling that he, a cold CEO, never thought he would experience. Meanwhile, Maya, after cleaning the lower floor, sat on a bench in the nearby park, sipping on her remaining sandwich. The CEO blushing? Maybe I should sketch some more designs to mess with him, she muttered, then burst out laughing. If Mom knew, she'd probably say I'm making it up. She shook her head, put the water bottle away, and continued with her work, unaware that she had made Julian Sterling, the man who had never doubted himself, begin to question the very limits he had set for his world. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Julian Sterling was not someone who easily changed his decisions, but after lunch at the small cafe, where he awkwardly mispronounced cappuccino, and Maya laughed until he turned red, he knew he couldn't let her continue cleaning floors and pushing a cart. Investors not only praised Maya's idea for the Santorini resort project, but also prompted his architectural team to hold an emergency meeting to incorporate it into the main plan. Sitting in his office, looking at Maya's design on his screen, Julian felt a strong urge. He had to give her a chance, not out of pity, but because he believed Maya Carter, with her talent and self-assurance that needed no validation, deserved to stand on a much bigger stage. On Monday morning, Julian called Maya into his office. She walked in, still wearing her blue uniform, her worn-out sneakers creaking, but this time, she wasn't pushing a cleaning cart. Julian, in his sharp gray suit, stood up from his chair, trying to maintain a serious demeanor. Ms. Carter, I want you to join the Santorini project design team as an architectural assistant, he said, his voice firm. Your idea has proven its worth. This is an opportunity for you to work with my team. Maya widened her eyes, the mischievous smile disappearing and replaced by skepticism. Are you serious? I'm a janitor with no degree and no experience. Aren't you afraid I'll ruin your $1 million project? She crossed her arms, tilting her head as if daring him to change his mind. Julian shook his head, his gaze resolute. You've done things my entire team hasn't been able to. Don't doubt yourself. If you're wrong, I'll take responsibility. But I know you won't be wrong. Maya fell silent, a strange feeling rising within her. She was used to being looked down on, used to the curious stares from colleagues when she pushed her cleaning cart through the hallway. But now the most powerful man in the company was looking at her as if she were the missing piece to a grand puzzle. Okay, she said, her voice light but certain, but if I do well, you'll have to give me a raise. Mopping floors doesn't pay enough for dreams. Julian laughed, a rare sound that startled even him. Deal, he replied, extending his hand for a handshake. Maya took his hand, feeling his warm grip and the tight squeeze that was perhaps a little more than necessary, then winked. Don't regret it, boss. On her first day as architectural assistant, Maya entered the design team's meeting room, feeling like a sparrow who had flown into an eagle's nest. She wore a white t-shirt and jeans, the most professional outfit she had, but still felt out of place among the suits and expensive shirts. The design team, 5 people in total, looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to doubt. Marcus, the team leader, a man in his 30s with slick-back gelled hair and a forced smile, spoke first. So this is the janitor who saved the project? His voice was dripping with sarcasm, making the atmosphere in the room grow a few degrees colder. Maya, undeterred, sat down and opened her laptop, a surprise gift from Julian to help her with the job. Janitor or not, I'm here, she said, flashing a calm smile. Who wants to hear a new idea for the infinity pool? Without waiting for a response, she began presenting, quickly sketching a design on the whiteboard. A flowing infinity pool that followed the contours of the cliff, with LED lights reflecting the night sky. The idea was not only beautiful, but also reduced the cost of the lighting installation. The team, though reluctant, nodded in agreement. A young architect named Sophie whispered, "She is excellent." But not everyone was impressed. Marcus, feeling his position threatened, whispered to a colleague during the break, She's just lucky. How can someone without a degree outshine us? This idea must have been stolen from somewhere. Maya, overhearing as she walked by, stopped and turned back to look at Marcus. Luck is also a skill, buddy, she said, her voice soft but sharp. If you want to try your luck next time, let me pick ideas from your trash. The whole room burst into laughter, except for Marcus, whose face turned bright red as he silently turned away. That afternoon, Julian called Maya into his office to check on her progress. He was surprised to see that she had already prepared a new sketch for the main lobby, with details inspired by ancient Greek architecture, but still modern. You did this in one day? He asked, his voice betraying admiration. Maya shrugged. I didn't take a lunch break, so I had some free time. Do you like it? Julian looked at her, his gaze softening. I like it, he said. And both of them knew he wasn't just talking about the sketch. However, Maya didn't let herself get carried away by the newfound spotlight. She knew this job was a rare opportunity, but she also feared that she wouldn't be enough, feared that Marcus's doubts and those of others might be right. When she left his office, she sat alone in the break room, looking at her worn-out sneakers and muttering to herself, what am I doing? From mopping floors to sketching a resort? Maybe I'm dreaming. But then she smiled, recalling Julian's handshake and the trust in his eyes. Well, if I'm dreaming big, she told herself, standing up and preparing for the next day. Meanwhile, Julian stood at the balcony of his office, looking down at the twinkling city. He thought about Maya, the girl who not only amazed his design team, but also made him, someone who always controlled everything, begin to feel his heartbeat out of rhythm. He knew that bringing Maya into the team wasn't just a professional decision, it was opening a door he never thought he'd walk through. Maya Carter, now officially the architectural assistant for the Santorini project, walked into the meeting room at Sterling Enterprises with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was no longer wearing her blue janitor's uniform, but instead a white shirt and black trousers, the most professional outfit she could afford, bought in a rush from a discount store to look more professional. Her worn-out sneakers were still there, a reminder that she was still herself, even though she now sat at the same table as top architects. But the atmosphere in the room was far from friendly. Marcus, the design team leader, with his slick-back gelled hair and cold gaze, looked at her as if she had just stepped in from another planet. Welcome to the real world, Ms. Carter, he said, his tone laced with sarcasm. I hope you can keep up. Maya shrugged, flashing a mischievous grin. I run fast, don't worry, she replied, causing Sophie, a young architect on the team, to cover her mouth to hide a smile. But Marcus didn't laugh. He felt threatened by Maya's ideas that had made the entire team take notice. A janitor with no degree, being personally recruited by Julian Sterling, the Arctic Storm, into the team? To Marcus, that was a slap to his ego. That day, Marcus decided to challenge Maya. He assigned her an almost impossible task: complete a detailed design for the spa area of the resort within 24 hours, with the requirement to incorporate a solar-powered hot water system. You manage the infinity pool, so this should be easy, right? Marcus said, his smile dripping with challenge. The team watched Maya, waiting for her to decline or hesitate, but Maya nodded, her voice nonchalant. 24 hours? Sure, but if I finish it, you have to buy the team coffee. The good kind, not instant coffee. The room burst into laughter except for Marcus, whose face turned dark. Maya immediately got to work, pulling out her laptop and sitting at a corner of the meeting room, starting to sketch. She had read about solar hot water systems in an old book at the library, and although she had no practical experience, she knew how to apply the theory. She drew a system of pipes hidden beneath the spa's roof, utilizing the abundant sunlight in Santorini, coupled with insulated glass panels to maintain a stable temperature. The idea not only saved costs, but was also eco-friendly, a feature she knew the investors would love. Meanwhile, Julian, though busy with meetings, couldn't help but pay attention to Maya. He walked past the meeting room and saw her sitting there, her hair tied up, her fingers swiftly moving across the keyboard. He paused, pretending to check documents, but kept glancing toward her. Is she doing okay? He asked Sophie, trying to keep his voice neutral. Sophie smiled. Better than okay, boss. Marcus is trying to make things hard for her, but I bet he'll regret it. Julian nodded, a small smile flickering across his face, then left, feeling lighter than he expected. Precisely 24 hours later, Maya presented her design in the meeting room. She pointed at the screen, explaining each detail with confidence, as if she had been doing this her whole life. This system reduces operational costs by 15% compared to the old design, and the clients will love it because it's green. Who wouldn't want to boast about being in an eco-friendly spa, right? She winked, making the whole team laugh, except for Marcus. He scrutinized the design, trying to find a flaw, but couldn't. "You did well," he muttered, his voice reluctant. Maya shrugged. "Thanks, but I'm still waiting for that coffee." After the meeting, Marcus, though unwilling to admit it, had to acknowledge that Maya wasn't just lucky. But he didn't stop there. In a private moment, he altered the data in Maya's report, adding a small error that would make her look bad during the upcoming investor meeting. Maya, with her sharp instincts, spotted the mistake when double-checking the documents at the last minute. She corrected the error, printed the report again, and walked into the meeting with a confident smile, leaving Marcus stunned. Julian, watching from afar, felt growing admiration. He called Maya into his office afterward, pretending to ask about the project. "You handled Marcus well," he said, his eyes gleaming. Maya laughed. "He thought I was easy to knock down, but I've cleaned the whole 27th floor in an hour. Marcus is much easier." Julian laughed too, and for the first time, he wondered if he was falling for the girl who once made him lift his foot to clean the floor. Meanwhile, Maya, leaving the office, stood in the hallway, looking down at her worn-out sneakers. "Did I just beat a design team leader?" she muttered, then laughed out loud. "When I get my paycheck, I'm buying new shoes to celebrate." She walked on, unaware that not only had she beaten Marcus, but she was also winning the heart of the most powerful man in the company. Maya Carter, now fully accustomed to her role as architectural assistant, walked into the Sterling Enterprises office with a burst of energy. She wasn't in her blue janitor's uniform anymore. Instead, she wore a light blue shirt and black trousers, the most professional outfit she had, which she had bought hastily from a discount store to look more professional. Her worn-out sneakers were still there, a reminder that she was still herself, even though she now sat at the same table as top architects. But the atmosphere in the meeting room wasn't friendly. Marcus, the design team leader, with his slicked-back gelled hair and cold stare, looked at her as though she had just stepped in from another planet. "Welcome to the real world, Ms. Carter," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I hope you can keep up." Maya shrugged, flashing a mischievous grin. "I run fast, don't worry," she replied, causing Sophie, a young architect on the team, to cover her mouth to hide a smile. But Marcus didn't laugh. He felt threatened by Maya's ideas that had made the whole team take notice. A janitor with no degree, being personally recruited by Julian Sterling, the Arctic Storm, into the team. To Marcus, that was a slap to his ego. That day, Marcus decided to challenge Maya. He gave her an almost impossible task: complete a detailed design for the spa area of the resort within 24 hours, with the requirement to incorporate a solar-powered hot water system. "You manage the infinity pool, so this should be easy, right?" Marcus said, his smile dripping with challenge. The team watched Maya, waiting for her to decline or hesitate. But Maya nodded, her voice nonchalant. 24 hours? Sure, but if I finish it, you have to buy the team coffee. The good kind, not instant coffee. The room burst into laughter, except for Marcus, whose face turned dark. Maya immediately got to work, pulling out her laptop and sitting in a corner of the meeting room, starting to sketch. She had read about solar hot water systems in an old book at the library, and although she had no practical experience, she knew how to apply the theory. She drew a system of pipes hidden beneath the spa's roof, utilizing the abundant sunlight in Santorini, coupled with insulated glass panels to maintain a stable temperature. The idea not only saved costs, but was also eco-friendly, a feature she knew the investors would love. Meanwhile, Julian, though busy with meetings, couldn't help but pay attention to Maya. He walked past the meeting room and saw her sitting there, her hair tied up, her fingers swiftly moving across the keyboard. He paused, pretending to check documents, but kept glancing toward her. "Is she doing okay?" he asked Sophie, trying to keep his voice neutral. Sophie smiled. Better than okay, boss. Marcus is trying to make things hard for her, but I bet he'll regret it. Julian nodded, a small smile flickering across his face, then left, feeling lighter than he expected. Precisely 24 hours later, Maya presented her design in the meeting room. She pointed at the screen, explaining each detail with confidence, as if she had been doing this her whole life. This system reduces operational costs by 15% compared to the old design, and the clients will love it because it's green. Who wouldn't want to boast about being in an eco-friendly spa, right? She winked, making the whole team laugh, except for Marcus. He scrutinized the design, trying to find a flaw, but couldn't. You did well, he muttered, his voice reluctant. Maya shrugged. Thanks, but I'm still waiting for that coffee. After the meeting, Marcus, though unwilling to admit it, had to acknowledge that Maya wasn't just lucky, but he didn't stop there. In a private moment, he altered the data in Maya's report, adding a small error that would make her look bad during the upcoming investor meeting. Maya, with her sharp instincts, spotted the mistake when double-checking the documents at the last minute. She corrected the error, printed the report again, and walked into the meeting with a confident smile, leaving Marcus stunned. Julian, watching from afar, felt growing admiration. He called Maya into his office afterward, pretending to ask about the project. You handled Marcus well, he said, his eyes gleaming. Maya laughed. He thought I was easy to knock down, but I've cleaned the whole 27th floor in an hour. Marcus is much easier. Julian laughed too, and for the first time he wondered if he was falling for the girl who once made him lift his foot to clean the floor. Meanwhile, Maya, leaving the office, stood in the hallway, looking down at her worn-out sneakers. Did I just beat a design team leader? She muttered, then laughed out loud. When I get my paycheck, I'm buying new shoes to celebrate. She walked on, unaware that not only had she beaten Marcus, but she was also winning the heart of the most powerful man in the company. Maya Carter never imagined she would set foot in a place like Santorini. She, a girl who used to spend her days pushing a cleaning cart and mopping office floors, was now standing on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea, where whitewashed houses stacked upon each other like sparkling sugar cubes under the sun. This trip was Julian Sterling's idea, who claimed that the design team needed a real-world evaluation of the resort project. But Maya wasn't naive. She saw the look in Julian's eyes when he invited her to join. A look not just of a CEO seeking professional input, but of a man trying to find an excuse to be closer to her. The flight to Santorini was long and tiring, but Maya made the most of it, sketching more ideas in an old notebook. Julian, sitting beside her in business class, pretended to read a report, but kept glancing at her sketches. Aren't you going to rest, Carter? He asked, his voice teasing. Maya shrugged without looking up. Rest? Why rest when I'm designing an entire resort in my head? Besides, this seat is way more comfortable than the bus I usually take, so I have to take advantage of it. Julian chuckled, the sound making the flight attendant glance over at them. He shook his head, wondering why this girl always made him feel both flustered and amused. When they arrived in Santorini, Maya felt reinvigorated. She wore a white t-shirt, shorts, and her familiar worn-out sneakers, the only remnants of her janitor life. Julian, in a green polo and sunglasses, still looked like a CEO, but there was something more relaxed about him than usual. They, along with a small team from the design group, went on a site visit to the cliffside where the resort would be built. Maya, with her notebook in hand, walked everywhere, measuring, sketching, and asking questions that made the local engineers stop and admire her. If we raise the foundation here, we can reduce the leveling costs while still preserving the view of the sea, she said, pointing at a rugged patch of land. Julian, standing next to her, nodded with admiration. You're a real treasure, Carter, he whispered, causing Maya to blush but pretend she didn't hear him. The first day passed in lively discussions, but Maya didn't just work. She soaked in every moment in Santorini, from eating a strawberry popsicle by the street, watching donkeys carry loads up the hill, to taking pictures of narrow alleys lined with bougainvillea. Julian, used to rushed business trips with packed schedules, unknowingly slowed his pace to keep up with her. Aren't you tired? He asked when he saw Maya stop to admire a lazy cat lying in the sun. Tired? How could I be tired when the whole world is this beautiful? She answered, her bright smile making Julian forget he was supposed to be here for work. On the second evening, after a long day of surveying, Julian invited Maya for a walk along the beach to discuss the project further. But they both knew it was just an excuse. Under the sunset, with the sky turning shades of orange and pink, they stopped on a rock overlooking the sea. Maya, her hair blowing in the wind, pointed at the horizon. Do you see that? If the restaurant is here, guests will feel like they're dining between the sky and the sea. That's the kind of experience they'd pay for. Julian looked at her, not at the view. You're not just saving this project, Carter, he said, his voice deep and sincere. You've saved me. Maya turned, her eyes widening in surprise. Saved you? I thought you were the superhero in the suit, needing no saving? She laughed, but her voice trembled slightly. Julian stepped closer, taking her hand, his touch warm and firm. I've lived in a world where everything has to be perfect, but you make me want to live more genuinely. Maya felt a mix of nervousness and warmth, unsure of how to respond for the first time. She wanted to pull her hand away but couldn't. Julian's gaze under the sunset was no longer that of a cold CEO, but of a man letting his heart lead the way. Neither of them spoke further. Julian leaned down, and they shared their first kiss gentle, sweet, as if the whole world was reduced to the sound of the waves and the glow of the sunset. When they pulled away, Maya blushed, trying to hide it with a joke. If I'd known redesigning the plans would lead to this, maybe I should have made them worse. Julian laughed loudly, pulling her close. Don't dream, Carter. If you made them worse, I'd fire you right away. The trip ended with the design completed, but what was more significant was the change in their relationship. On the flight back, Maya dozed off on Julian's shoulder, her notebook still open on her lap. Julian looked at her hair now undone, and realized that he didn't just want her on the design team, he wanted her in his life. Maya, in her dream, saw herself drawing a small house. Not the multi-million-dollar resort, but a place with Julian, where she could be herself. When the plane landed, they both walked out of the airport, exchanging looks that held more profound meaning. Maya, with her mischievous smile, said, Thanks for the trip, boss. But next time, don't forget to bring sunscreen. Your face is as red as a boiled lobster. Julian laughed, shaking his head. You don't let me off the hook, Carter. But deep down, they both knew. They were no longer just colleagues. Santorini had changed everything, and the road ahead, though challenging, promised to be a journey worth taking. Returning from Santorini, Maya Carter felt like she was walking down a path that was both familiar and unfamiliar. The kiss under the sunset by the Aegean Sea with Julian Sterling still made her heart race every time she thought about it. But she wasn't the type to let her emotions carry her away. She was still Maya, the girl with the worn-out sneakers, the mischievous smile, and a burning passion for architecture, despite never stepping foot in a university. The Santorini project, thanks to her brilliant ideas, was nearing completion, and the design team at Sterling Enterprises was working at full speed to prepare for the press conference, an event that would shape the future of the company and Maya's own future. But before stepping into the spotlight of the project, Maya wanted Julian to understand her real world, not the bright offices or the windswept cliffs of Santorini, but the small apartment where she grew up, the place where her mother, Ellen, had sacrificed everything to raise her. One weekend afternoon, Maya invited Julian to her apartment in the suburbs, where the stairs creaked and the smell of freshly baked bread from the neighbor's house wafted through the air. Julian, forgoing his usual CEO suit, wore a dark blue polo and jeans, the casual attire he had begun to love, thanks to Maya. He held a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, looking awkward like a schoolboy meeting a parent for the first time. Welcome to my domain, Maya said with a mischievous grin. Don't worry, no trash cans need you to lift your foot this time. Ellen, a thin woman with silver hair streaked with gray, greeted Julian with a warm smile but sharp eyes, as though she could see through everything. So you're the one who pulled my girl out of cleaning, she asked, her voice laced with a hint of teasing. Maya, who was setting the table in the small kitchen corner, interjected, Mom, don't scare him. He's the CEO, but he's more afraid of you than any investor. Julian laughed, placing the bouquet on the table, trying to appear natural, though he was clearly not used to this cozy, cramped space. During a simple dinner with pumpkin soup, homemade bread, and salad, Ellen talked about Maya, the little girl who used to draw houses on old notebooks, always pretending to be strong, even though she grew up in difficult circumstances. "I'm a single mom," she said, her voice softening as she looked at Maya, who was pretending to busy herself with the soup bowl. "Maya's dad left when she was young. I worked day and night to raise her, but when I got sick, Maya gave up her dream of architecture to work. She's always been optimistic, always making me laugh, but I know she's had to sacrifice a lot." She looked at Julian, her gaze serious. "You're the first one to see the light in her. Please take care of her." Julian, moved by her sincerity, nodded. "I promise, ma'am," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Maya's, who blushed but tried to hide it by taking a sip of water. To break the emotional mood, Maya told a funny story about the time she drew a supergiant house on her notebook, only for her mom to say it looked like a chicken coop. They all laughed, and for the first time, Julian felt like he wasn't just a CEO, but a part of a family, even if it was just for a moment. As they left the apartment, he held Maya's hand, whispering, "Your mom is amazing, and so are you." Maya winked. "Thanks for surviving dinner. Next time you cook, don't let my mom do it all." Julian laughed loudly, promising to try making something better than spaghetti. Meanwhile, the Santorini project continued to exceed expectations. Thanks to Maya's creative ideas, from the infinity pool to the solar-powered hot water system, the resort wasn't just beautiful, but also cost-effective and environmentally friendly. The night before the press conference, Maya stayed late at the office, double-checking every detail of the design. Julian, also staying late, brought her a hot cup of coffee. "Aren't you tired, Carter?" he asked, sitting down next to her. Maya shrugged. "Tired, but I don't want to mess up tomorrow. This is the first time I'm stepping onto such a big stage." Julian smiled, his gaze softening. "You'll shine, I know it." The press conference at Sterling Enterprises was a grand event, with investors, journalists, and potential clients flocking in. Maya, in an elegant turquoise dress, a surprise gift from Sophie, stood beside Julian as he presented the final design. When he announced that the project had been approved with a budget lower than expected and secured a multi-million-dollar contract, the entire room erupted in applause. Julian looked at Maya, smiling. "A big thank you to our brilliant architectural assistant, Maya Carter, who turned the Santorini dream into a reality," he said, making her blush amidst the applause. Marcus, standing in the corner, clapped silently, but his eyes still held a look of envy. After the press conference, heavy rain started pouring. Maya, without an umbrella, stood under the building's awning, watching the rain fall like a glittering curtain. Julian, drenched in his suit, walked over, his eyes bright. "Maya, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice slightly trembling from the cold rain and emotions. She raised an eyebrow. "Make it quick, or you'll really be a boiled lobster." Julian laughed, then suddenly knelt down, pulling a simple yet elegant ring from his jacket pocket. "You've saved this project, but more importantly, you've saved me from a world full of work and loneliness. I can't promise you the world, but I promise to give you everything I have. Will you marry me, Carter?" Maya's eyes widened, and for the first time she had no witty reply. She looked at him, drenched but sincere, and nodded. "All right, but next time, remember the umbrella," she said, her voice choking. They embraced under the rain amidst laughter and tears blending, while colleagues from afar looked on with warm smiles. Months later, Maya and Julian held a simple wedding at a small park near the library, where Maya used to sit and dream about buildings. There were no fancy guests, no five-star restaurants, just Sophie, Ellen, Clara, the elderly librarian who officiated, and a few close friends. Maya wore a simple white dress and the new shoes Julian gave her, but still joked, "The old ones fit me better, you know." Julian, in a simple suit, held her hand, whispering, "You're the most beautiful design I've ever made, Carter." Ellen, sitting in the front row, wiped away tears, happy to see her daughter find someone who truly appreciated her worth. But Maya's story didn't stop at the wedding. After the success of the Santorini project, her name began to spread. Architecture magazines hailed the unqualified architect who achieved the impossible, and Maya was invited to join new projects, from boutique hotels in Italy to eco-resorts in the Caribbean. Despite not having a college degree, she proved her talent through creative designs, attention to detail, and the ability to bring ideas to life. Once, at an international architecture seminar, when asked about her lack of qualifications, Maya laughed loudly. Qualifications? I have a library, YouTube, and a few trash bins full of my boss's old newspapers. That's enough. Her words became legendary, inspiring thousands of young people to follow their passion despite the barriers. Julian, now her husband, always supported her. He turned down all offers for Maya to work with other companies, saying, "She's the greatest asset of Sterling Enterprises, and mine too." But Maya didn't let herself be tied down. She opened a small design studio, specializing in eco-friendly projects, and became a symbol for those who believed that talent didn't need certification. A famous article called her the architect of dreams, and when Maya read it, she just laughed. Sounds impressive, but I still like drawing houses on notebook paper more. The story closes with an image of Maya and Julian in their small home, sitting at a wooden table, sketching out a little haven, not a multi-million-dollar resort, but a place with a garden full of flowers for Ellen. Add a swing for Mom, Maya said, drawing quickly. Julian smiled, placing his hand over hers. And a corner for you to sketch your dreams, Mrs. Sterling. Maya winked. And what about you, Mr. Sterling? Anything you want added? Julian leaned down, kissing her forehead. Just you, that's enough.